How'd you do that? I'm the Batman.
When it comes to Batman media outside of the comics, there's more than a few projects that have played a crucial part in building the legacy of the pop culture juggernaut that is Batman. One show that probably comes to everyone's mind is Batman the Animated Series. We all know it undeniably goes hard as hell, and the impact it had on Batman to not only comic book readers but the average person was arguably crucial in bringing the Caped Crusader to the next generation of kids watching cartoons at the time. It was a great introduction into the world of Batman with a stunning voice cast and genuinely iconic animation. People have talked endlessly about the greatness of Batman the Animated Series, and rightfully so. It's fantastic. So instead, I want to talk about a different show. An animated Batman show that I think deserves some of that same love. The Batman 2004 was the predecessor to Batman the Animated Series, created by Warner Brothers and later moved over to Cartoon Network. It hosted a solid 5-season run with 13 episodes per season, and even had a movie featuring... Wait, hold up, is that Dracula? The series was immediately divisive for a few reasons. One, it had none of the original voice cast returning from the animated series. It was weird hearing these new voices come out of familiar characters after the voice cast of the animated series served up some absolutely phenomenal performances. I get it, Kevin Conroy is the definitive voice of Batman and Mark Hamill's Joker is unmatched. These are just simple facts of the Batman mythos. But this cast delivers a surprisingly solid portrayal of their characters. Rino Romano embodies the younger Bruce Wayne perfectly, and has a great take on the signature growl in his voice as Batman.
You have made me one very sad clown! Where'd you go? Knock, knock. Who's there?
I mean, this cast is pretty top tier. You got legend Tom Kenny as Penguin, which is probably one of the weirdest but somehow best casting decisions I've ever heard.
Just one question, Batman. How'd you find me?
You left a trail of breadcrumbs, Cobblepot.
Please. Now that all pretenses are off, call me Penguin. A flightless bird, but one with style.
Ron Perlman voices a more Bayou-centric take on the Killer Croc that truly is killer. And Bane, who is... well, he's here.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Clancy Brown voices Mr. Freeze and Lex Luthor, and many more give incredible voices to Gotham's inhabitants. My personal favorites being Tom Kenny's Penguin as mentioned earlier. Peter MacNicol's Kirk Langstrom is phenomenal, really selling that creepy scientist vibe and managing to be unsettling without being like super over the top. And Jason Marsden's Firefly is just a perfect representation of the cocky bad guy trying to not look stupid trope. And honestly, it adds a lot of fun into the show's Villain of the Week roster.
Langstrom couldn't have used fruit bats?
Begging your pardon, Master Bruce.
Let's just say, I'm no longer the only bat in town.
Besides its cast, the show had another glaring difference from previous iterations of Batman, and that being its art style. This much more angular and sharp design for the characters is definitely distinct and really gives the show its own identity, and I personally think it's fantastic. When it comes to character designs, it's kinda hit or miss, but when it hits, it hits. Designs like Bane and Hugo Strange are, let's be honest, these are trash.
It's disgusting!
And the Penguin in the show has these weird sidekick scissor hand freaks that are just like weird, freaky, I don't know, man, I hate them. Their fights with Batman always end up looking really cool because they like move so weird, but other than that, when they're just kind of around, it's like, I don't know, what the hell even is this, man? It's weird. But there are a few character designs in this show that you can't even lie, they cooked on these. I mean, Man-Bat looks absolutely terrifying in the best way. They managed to add a fresh twist to Clayface, who we'll be talking more about later, so remember this face, this Clay face. And Mr. Freeze, I mean, come on, just look at him. He's incredible. I freaking love this Mr. Freeze, dude. God. And of course, the Batman in this show looks just as impressive. I'm usually on the side of Batman having longer ears on the cowl, but here the shorter ears work well with the sharp angles of his everything else. I mean, this Batman has claws, and his cape is arguably my favorite part of the costume, being so long it lays along the floor when he's standing still. Side note, I just love when artists draw Batman's cape cloaked around him, and they do it a lot in this show. It's just a minor detail, and I love it every time I see it. Besides the Batman himself, the Batcave in this show was so cool, with multiple hidden entrances around the city showcased during the show. It feels like every episode, Bruce is driving the Batmobile through a new hidden tunnel behind a dumpster or something, and it really adds to that charm that shows like this had back then. Speaking of the Batmobiles in this show are absolutely rad as hell. Personally, I like the one from season 1 slightly more than the one from later seasons, even though it was essentially just a black and blue supercar. But that thing had some sauce, dude. I don't care. I'll die on that hill. Some of the new character designs that really got people talking were the Riddler and Joker particularly. The Riddler kind of got a Marilyn Manson style rebrand that people didn't really seem too fond of, but I honestly didn't hate it. I think for the vibe this show was going for, it worked. The Joker was voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who, like the Tom Kenny casting, did not immediately strike me as a stellar casting choice. Nothing against the guy, his voice just isn't what I would expect to hear coming out of the Clown Prince of Crime. Until I actually heard his take on the Clown Prince of Crime. And, well, I'll admit it, I was served a fresh plate of my own foolishness with a side of idiotic assumption. And, unfortunately, I was forced to eat my own words as I was blessed with one of my favorite interpretations of the Joker to hit any kind of screen, period.
How's this, Squidward?
It's beautiful.
A lot of people do not agree with that take, and that's totally fine. Characters are interpreted differently by everyone, and your favorite takes on them absolutely do not have to align with mine. But the amount of energy and unique charm Richardson brought to the character is undeniable.
Takes after his pa, wouldn't you say?
He absolutely made the Joker his own, while making sure it was still recognizably the Joker. While the changes are obvious, like his design being more animalistic and his outfit choice being a wacky colored straitjacket, though he does get an outfit similar to his classic purple suit later in the series. The tweaks made to Joker fit the tone set by the Gotham this show has created and play well into stories with a less experienced Batman. We get to see a fresh take on how these iconic foils meet and how the Joker forms his obsession with Batman, including one of my favorite episodes where Joker tries to take over the role of Batman by making his own suit and enacting vigilante justice on jaywalkers and children vandalizing a sidewalk. The Joker, while certainly being as cruel and maniacal as the Joker should be, is also seemingly more respectful of this series' version of Harley Quinn, making the whole pairing seem a lot less problematic and more like two lunatics in love. It's kind of sweet to see. As I mentioned earlier, this is a younger and less experienced depiction of Gotham's Dark Guardian. It shares a surprising bit in common with Matt Reeves' The Batman, as they both feature a 26-year-old Bruce Wayne that is 2 years deep into his career as the Bat. Though this take is considerably more lighthearted and doesn't feature nearly as much beating criminals to a pulp just for picking the wrong night to act foolish.
The hell are you supposed to be?
I'm vengeance.
This is a Batman before Robin, even before the Bat Signal and Commissioner Gordon, and more importantly, this is a Batman that fails. He gets handed more than a few L's. In fact, it's kind of a major part of the show's formula. A new villain will be introduced, Batman will have an initial encounter where he's beaten, but escapes with new knowledge of the foe he's met. He figures out some sort of weakness, and goes back to use his newfound knowledge and or gadgets to settle the old ass-beating scoreboard. Which, for the shows coming out around this time, worked well, and makes the stories within the episodes feel a bit more self-contained, while keeping continuity simple. Another thing this show does a bit differently than other depictions of the Batman Bruce Wayne character, is that it really takes specific care to establish Bruce Wayne as his own character. I mean, Bruce is always there in Batman media, he kinda has to be, but this show really makes the strain that being Batman has on keeping up the public persona, as well as the personal relationships of Bruce Wayne, apparent to us. I think this was done more so to interest younger audiences and staying invested in the split personality kind of life many of these other superhero shows focus on. But honestly, I kind of think it's refreshing. Like many of the other changes, it adds something new to the show while remaining familiar to what we would expect a younger Bruce Wayne who's still learning how to balance being Batman and being a public figure to be like. This is done especially well with Ethan Bennett, who's a detective at the GCPD, tasked with bringing in Batman while at the same time being a close friend of Bruce Wayne, having been a childhood friend of Bruce's. The show plays with this concept a lot in the first season until Bennett becomes the victim of a chemical substance created by Joker that turns things into putty, which ultimately transforms Detective Bennett into Clayface. The sequence of Ethan realizing what he's become, and the series of events that follow make for what I would consider some of the best storytelling and character development in the history of television. I mean, honestly, it's incredible. If you haven't seen the two-part episode, The Rubber Face of Comedy and The Clay Face of Sadness, I mean, they're breathtaking. You need to go watch them. Other villains got some origin reworks that aren't as intense and impactful as Clayface, like Mr. Freeze being a career jewelry thief before becoming a supervillain as opposed to the classic biochemist turned Iceman origin he usually has, or Poison Ivy being aged down and being a classmate and subsequent rival of Batgirl, having them be friends with Pamela being an environmental activist turned eco-terrorist, which makes for a fun concept and gives Batgirl a bit more personal stakes in the conflict than she'd normally get in an episode. Speaking of Batgirl, one of the factors that played a role in what they could and couldn't do with this version of Batman and his wacky pals was the infamous Bat embargo. If you don't know, the Bat embargo is a rule at DC that two separate versions of Batman or supporting characters can't be actively represented at the same time in movies and TV shows. Essentially, if a Batman movie uses, let's say, Condiment King, then a TV show coming out around the same time can't use the aforementioned Monarch of Sauces. Due to this Bat embargo, characters like Two-Face and Scarecrow aren't included anywhere in this show, and Robin was off the table for the first few seasons. Because they weren't allowed to include Robin, Barbara Gordon's Batgirl actually gets introduced first as Batman's protege, which works surprisingly well for these characters. I'm a Robin fan through and through, but Barbara being slightly older than Dick leads to some really entertaining sibling-like rivalry that reminds me a lot of my older sister and I growing up. It's a change that isn't super consequential, but really heightens the freshness the show exudes. The tweaks aren't massive, but they're just big enough to give this series its own identity within the world of existing Batman media. This show, while having its admittedly very striking differences, manages to use those differences in conjunction with what we know and love about these characters, and create a wonderfully unique version of Gotham that is still to its core unmistakably Gotham, making a lasting impact on my perception of Batman and his rogues gallery, and filling me with a great sense of joy and comfort every time I return to this series to watch it all the way through again. I could probably talk about this show for hours and how much I love it. I mean, it was a big part of my childhood. I remember watching it as a kid and it just encapsulating me with the action, the sound effects, and just everything about it. I'm certainly not the first person to say this, and I surely won't be the last, but this show is an underrated gem. And if you like Batman at all, check it out for yourself and let me know in the comments what you think. Anyway, I appreciate you listening in. This has been Uncommon Colin, just giving a little bit of love to a show that I love so much, and I hope other fans can kind of find and share the same sentiment as well. But, like I said, I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.
You have the right to remain silent.
Bennett, spot the perp?
The Bat.